Good morning, Rabbi Isai. Lili nishmasi mimerosi rus bas remordchai. The Olam is in a great mood today because we have a guest all the way from Monroe, Avi Minkov, right? Shalom Aleichem. That's why if you hear a lot of, the Olam is excited. Yeah, the Olam is very excited. Shalom, this is Mike Dinowitz from New York City. Kol hakavod to Molandi, who sponsored today's daf in honor of my 60th birthday. However, I feel compelled to correct the record. I actually did not start with you at Brachas Daf Beis. I actually started in the middle of Brachas. Daf Gimel or something, I don't know. It's all the same. Brachas is Brachas. To me, it's the same. You have to subtract another American from the list. You're now down to 3 guys who started MDY. No, I was saying at that shul, not in America. There's hundreds. Being a person with no yeshiva background whatsoever, learning Gemara has always been daunting to me. But you make it accessible, fun, and interesting as possible. Before taking on the daf with you, I never finished any sefer before in my life. And now I hit 60 today, the 10th of Iyar. It's my actual birthday. I can proudly say that I've completed 11 Masechtas of Gemara. You too, Benny. Be'ezer Hashem, 11 Masechtas of Gemara. If you would be listening, you know what I'm talking about. I'm HaKaras HaTov, Mike Dinowitz. Yitzchak Rosenberg says, you mentioned that today's shiur for Hasidim to send in some pictures. Thank you for your shiur. They sent it from Monroe. They sent in the guy himself. But here's the picture of Yitzchak Rosenberg with me, and I see Akiva Solkowitz and a few other Gewaldige guys over there. This is Mark Ashkenazi all the way on the left, Uncle Phil in the green, with Glenn Ackerman all the way on the right. His daughter's like Olympic. What are you showing me? This chair? This chair has to go away, he says. Okay. Next. Netanel Dadun. I would like to thank all the MDY team. I'm a Daf Yomi magid shiur in Givat Ze'ev. I've been giving shiur to a small group in Hebrew since Sukkah. I was introduced to MDY before Yevamos, my good friend David Cantor, the one who gave me Sandakos. Rav Eli's unique spirit and love for Torah learning is contagious. Always listen to the shiur, charts myself. From the end of the first parak, I've been receiving the PDFs that you send out in the email. I use them every day. It helps me prepare the shiur. They love it. The pictures, charts, funny cartoons. MDY has improved our shiur, and now they benefit Yidden learning in Hebrew as well. Please pass on to Rav Eli. He has fans and followers in Givat Ze'ev, including the Israeli Hebrew branch of the MDY. I feel part of MDY's family, especially when the kids in the shiur point out in the corner of the screen to the MDY logo and ask me, "Maze katuv kan bapina ba'anglit?" I wish Rav Eli and the MDY team to be blessed. Torah, wishing you all the best. Love and respect. Netanel Dadon, he's a magid shiur. This is a refuah shlema to our dearest Tatin Zaidi, Jack Warman, who fell. I showed a picture of him at his grandson's chasana. Had a nasty fall, it says here. So he's in the hospital. Well, you missed a day. You haven't missed a day since the new Daf Yomi cycle started with Rav Eli. What better way to be mechazik you? Here's another guy. Started from Brachas Daf Beis. Show you and mommy our love and care. And want to wish you a refuah shlema through this shiur. Love. How do you pronounce that? Ibkassis, something like that. I don't know. I'm terrible at this. Rosenberg, Oritz, and Warman families. Eli Friedman. Your star Talmud Meir Kravetsky works for me. He talks about Yeshirim all the time. In 2 weeks in Rishon, listen to this, Rabbi Isai. The 900 streak thing is a joke. I'm celebrating 10 straight years without ever missing a daf. Oh, I just realized we're learning the sugya of 10 straight years and then having a child. 10 straight years without missing a daf. I never overslept. I've come to this shir no matter what. It's not a simple task. I came no matter what. Anyways, our family's making aliyah to Harbi this summer. Looking forward to joining you. Eli Friedman, he's one of those guys. He's going to sit in a seat and not move for the next 10 years. President. Something. Oh, you have a shtickle audio for me? This, Rabbi, is a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. This is a bus that goes from Lakewood to Manhattan every day. They daven and they learn. The Kol HaTorah on this bus is insane. Check this out. You ready? Here we go. Nice and loud.
All right, there it is.
First two guys who gave her excuses, and they say to her,
If you're listening to the war video, you'll be just stanking away non-stop.
You are not her.
Wow.
It's your fault, not my fault.
He's pointing to the guy in the corner who's doing the daf. The rest of the guys, they're probably not doing the daf. They're learning Eon or something. Listen.
Hashtag MDY, hashtag Masman of the Bus, hashtag BNH, hashtag Benson.
Bensi Rigler in the corner is learning. The rest of the guys are steiging away. Unbelievable. All right. This month's sponsor for the koilel is the covered Lzchus Shiduchim. One day, anonymous as a Zechus for Yeshua Leo Bensi Poiro to find the shidduch bekarov. Parnasah chodesh. Lili nishmas Rav Zechariah Shimon HaKohen Wallachtein says another guy. I hope it's another guy. Is it the third guy? It's the same guy. Same guy. He could eat 3 days of meat now. Lili nishmas Zechariah Shimon HaKohen Wallachtein Zechus Livrocha by his kids. Parnasah chodesh is Zechus to Ahron's Hatzlacha to you. And the video edited about Hatzlacha continuation. Not missing a shiur. L'zech nishmas Rav Yitzchak ben Benimin. Parnasah chodesh. Ahron Fraiman Lzchus continuing parnasah siyadta dishmaya Hatzlacha to rebelli. Shkoyach. Parnasah chodesh. The Boyer family. Eli Stefansky ben Eli Weinberg A. Dear family friend who suddenly passed away at the age of 59. He loved them. The Wolkenstein family. By the Lock and Lebovic families, Lakewood NJ, because Torah is the best segulah. Parnasah chodesh anonymously. Yosef. Parnasah chodesh anonymously. As HaKaras HaTov Hashem and as a Zechus, we continue health and bracha. Happy anniversary, Eli and Talia Erich. And happy birthday, Shmuel Babich. From Hech. Revush Shleim, there's Tati and Zaidi that we said already. And turning the daf. No, that we said already. We're going to say tomorrow. Rabbi Isai, here we go. Today is Daf Samach Vav Amud Aleph. Brand new perik, brand new start. Tell your friends to join. The official mission is sponsored by Anonymous for a Zechus for my wife and children. Gewaltige idea. I mentioned yesterday in shiur that if you want to do chazara, you just grab one of the masechtas and you put it on 1.5 speed and you go through a whole masechta quickly, like Megillah. Noam Fix wrote me in the middle of the day, goes, I took your advice, I'm starting. So then I took my own advice. I went back to, I tried to learn Daf Chav Zayin, and it wasn't going well. And then in the middle of the shiur, I said that the Belzer said that it's the hardest daf in Yevamos. I didn't realize it then. It was almost new to me, because if something is like more than a week old. So I put on the shiur, 2 speed. It's less than a half hour, It's geschmack stuff. So try it out. Try any masechta. Do a chazara. Start from beginning of Yevamos to here. It's 30 hours. That's it. 30 hours. Try it out. Let me know how it goes. I have a shayla for the olam, and if you know the answer, don't answer. But if you don't know the answer, try to answer it. The biblical zoo here in Eretz Yisrael, very, very highly recommended. If you come as a guest, you should go check it out. It's different than a lot of zoos. They don't have real cages. They have these wires. You're almost the one in the cage. The animals are kind of in the open. If they just jump over that water or whatever it is, they get you. So it's a great place to visit. This is actually one of these things. You go in and pet the monkeys, the whole thing. Who owns these animals? There's one guy in Eretz Yisrael that owns all the animals. Do you guys know who it is? So it's a private guy. Anybody? The answer is no. His name is Karp. He lives in Bat Yam. And the reason why he owns all the animals is because he's a kahn. So they were makneh to him, and therefore all the animals could eat truma. In Israel, you take truma samaisrus. Truma is 1% of all the produce, right here. Chart. Here we go. If you have produce, you have to give the kahn 1%, 2%. 2% is better. There's no shiur. It could really be 1 apple for 1,000,000, but they said 2% is nice. So now you have 2% of millions of apples and bananas and all this stuff. What do you do with it? So they give it to the zoo, or they sell it for bupkis. So the owner must be a kahn, and therefore the kahn's animals get to eat this truma. It's a great idea. So, yeah, it's the bigger amount. Yeah, because it's 10% of the 10%. Okay. Now, so it adds up. Menachem Mateh is saying, because it's really 10% of 10%. Yeah, but it's not really 10% of 10% of 9.8%. Okay. And I asked the fellow who told this to me once, I said, so what does he get by owning it? He said, oh, he gets to go to the zoo for free once a year. The second time he has to pay. Shma. It comes out of Chiddush here. When I was a kid, and I probably mentioned this because it's one of my favorite things. When I was a kid, I used to go to the Petach Tikva Zoo all the time and by myself. I don't know how in the world my parents let me go. I was 10 years old. Get on a bus. The first time I didn't even know where to go and I had to find it and I didn't know how to get home. I go from Bnei Brak to Petach Tikva. They had a chimpanzee there that was a trained chimpanzee. He was in a circus and his name was Joni. And if you knew how to get him upset, and I was very good at it, he would put on a show. It was a show out of anger, but for me it was a great show. So one of the things he would do is he would climb to the top of the cage and throw apples at you really hard. And he would spray water at you. He had a water hole, and you have to make him really, really angry. Get him in the head with a rock or something. No, never. But if you threw a cigarette at him, picked it up and smoke it backwards, the whole thing is great. And now I'm thinking to myself, those apples are truma. So you got to be very careful. You can't eat it. If it was a gishmaka apple or something, not that anybody would eat a chimpanzee's apple, fine. Zokt the Mishnah. So now we know about truma a little bit. We need to know two things before we start the Mishnah. When a woman gets married and she has, let's say, she owns nursing homes. We've discussed this many times. Just to be clear, she has nechasim. So let's say she owns a nursing home. Who gets to use the nursing home? Who owns the nursing home when she comes into the marriage? So there's two options. Either she comes in with nichsei milug or nichsei tzoyim barzel. It's the same. They're all the same. It's depending on her how she wants to allocate her nechasim. If she doesn't say anything, they automatically become milug. If she says something and she puts it in her ksuv, it becomes tzoyim barzel. What's the difference? Tzoyim barzel means that she tells her husband that he is responsible, he has a charayus. And therefore, in both cases, the husband gets to use and gets the profits. The profits of the nursing home go to the husband. We discussed why, because he's chayiv to the whole thing. But if he has a charayus, meaning if the value of the nursing home drops, the government stops paying for patients the way they used to pay. It happens, it's a cycle, right? And they get divorced. The husband, as she came in, the nursing home was worth $10 million. Now it's worth $8 million. So the husband has to give out of his pocket, he has to pay her $2 million cash because of tzoyim barzel. He took responsibility and a charayus on the nursing home. Now the Gemara is going to discuss today, since he took responsibility, who owns the nursing home? Do we view the husband as the pure owner or not? It seems like he's not the owner. He just takes a charayus. It's a big achrayus. Nah, it's a whole different thing. Let's not confuse ourselves here. And milug, the regular one without anything in the ksuba, the husband gets to enjoy the produce, the benefits, but he doesn't have a achrayus. So if the nursing home goes down in value, she takes the hit. In the other way around, if there's soim barzel, since he takes a charayus, if the nursing home goes up in value, now it's worth $20 million, the husband takes $10 million in his pocket, then he gives her the nursing home like that. So therefore, says the Mishnah, Amana l'kohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedin. As we know, these are illegal marriages. Kohen gadol cannot marry an almana. And if he does, he renders her a halala. A regular kohen cannot marry a divorcee, and if he marries her, she becomes a halala. Now, she comes in with her belongings. Father gave her slaves. She goes to chasana. You need a cleaning lady or this, here, avadim. So, if they're milug or tzoyim barzel, avdei milug lo yoichlu be'truma. Since who's the owner of the milug? He doesn't take responsibility. He gets to benefit from the slave. But who owns the slave? The woman. And the woman is what? A halala. So since she cannot eat in truma, her slave doesn't eat truma. She can't eat. She's the owner. She can't have truma. A halala, she's defiled. I have a good friend who's a chalal. Pashat a chalal. Why? because his father is about tshuva, and his mother is about tshuva, and they told him that they were with goyim or whatever beforehand, and he's a chalal. He cannot get an aliyah. He forever, all his kids. So it happens to be what? No, he's a chalal. He's the son of a kahn, and the parents get divorced. The father, who's not living now be'isr with a zayna, halachic zayna, he gets an aliyah. And everybody in shul says, "What's going on here? That's the father? Yeah, that's the father. He gets an aliyah. The son, who's a chal, is not getting an aliyah. What? Right, he can't get kohen. Yeah, not aliyah. I don't mean an aliyah. Oh, that's what you're saying? Oh, sorry. Yeah, court. He cannot get kohen. That's what I meant. He can't get kohen, but he can get Yisrael. He's like a regular guy. Yeah. I told him not to put it in the Belzer thing under chalal, the chalal category. Fine. So she becomes a halala because she married the kohen gadol, or she married the regular kohen because she's a grusha. She cannot eat truma, so her slaves that are considered hers because they're nichse melug also don't eat. However, Avdi Tzoyin Barzel, since he takes responsibility on these slaves, they become like his to a point. He owns them somewhat. Yoichelu. They can eat truma. They could eat truma, just like those animals in the zoo. You have nechasim here. Let me go back to this. Here, anything that a kohen acquires, you acquire a wife with kiddushin, you acquire a behema, you acquire a eved. Chasron, not to put the wife in that category, but it's you acquire her. Because she's mutter to eat truma if she's a regular woman. Fine. Veiluhein avdi melug. What's a regular melug? Mesu law. If the slave dies, it's her loss. V'moisiru, if they have children and they become more valuable, hoisiru law. They drafted this eved to the NBA. She gets the benefits. Now she's the kohen's wife. He has to support her and the slaves. No, they're considered hers. You have to feed them the more expensive stuff. What is it, Tzoyin Barzel? Since he takes full responsibility, so when they die, it's his responsibility. He has to give her a slave like she came into the marriage. They're married for 30 years. The slave died with old age. What's the lashon? Out of old age, whatever the lashon is. Meisuloi. When he came in, he was a young guy and he was very valuable. That's what he has to pay. He gets all the benefits of the shvach. Since he's responsible, they're like his slaves, and therefore, since he eats truma, the slaves also eat truma. If a Yisraelis gets married to a kohen, now based on this possible kohen nefesh kinyan kasboy, she gets to eat truma. And she brought in slaves. These belong to her, and she could eat truma. So Mela, her avadim eat truma. What if she comes from a family of kohanim, but she married Yisrael? The opposite. They're not allowed to eat truma. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to discuss and bring 3 reasons why. And Almana, the first line of the Mishnah. Almana l'kohen gadol. Almana, who marries a widow who marries a kohen gadol. The Mishnah says there's a difference if they're avdi melug or avdi tzoyin barzel. If they're her slaves, they don't eat. Says the Gemara, avdi melug lo yochlu b'truma. Amai. Lihevi kikinyono shekona kinyan. It should be like the acquired thing, like a slave who buys a slave. If a kohen owns a slave and that slave buys a slave, or in this case, he married a woman and she owns a slave, they should eat. A kohen who married a woman, or vikana avadim, or he bought slaves, they can eat truma. So the kinyan kasboy, what you acquire gets the truma. But how do you know the next step? The grandchildren of this kinyan. Now, how does a woman acquire a slave? She's in a marriage. Where does she have money from? She has money from Milug. She came into the marriage with a bank account. That's hers. She could buy. How does a slave buy a slave? Mashakona isha kona balo. Shalom aleichem guest. Should I embarrass you?
No.
Shalom aleichem. What's your name? Heshi Hurt from
Lakewood.
Lakewood. Wow. Kol hakavod. Lakewood is on the map. Shkoyach Reb Heshi. I won't embarrass you. I won't bring you up here. You know about this bus, this Lakewood Koila bus? You heard about this Lakewood Koila bus? No, you came late. Not to embarrass. No, I showed a video this morning. Not to embarrass you, There was a video of a bus. You'll see it when you do the Chazara. There's a bus that they were learning. Mamash steiging on the bus. They go from Lakewood to Manhattan every morning to the Diamond. You know about it. Koila bus. The Koila. It's Mamash called the Koila bus. Yeah. It goes to B&H? Oh, that's what he said, hashtag B&H. I got it. I thought maybe he's talking about Baruch Hashem. Okay. Fine. So, how could a slave acquire another slave? The famous thing, if somebody gives him money, everything, mashakona evekona rabbi, any money that a slave makes goes directly to the owner. But if you give him money, al menashe, in the rabbi rishus boy, then on condition, I'm giving you $100 on condition that your master doesn't have any control over it, then it remains the slave's. By the way, it's a good, they say in yeshiva, the mashgiach always gets up and says, Masha kana eved kana rabbi, that applies to human beings also. Whatever we own and acquire belongs to our master, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we don't really have full control over our money. I mean, everybody knows that, but l'saber soizin, just like a slave doesn't have control, we don't have control. So if you have to give tzedakah, you give tzedakah. It's not your option. It's not your money to decide what to do with it. How do we know? We're repeating the pasuk. Now, if you look at the chart, what happened? We just said this drasha before, a second ago, right, Mendy? How did you learn pshat? We're mamish repeating. Look before. It says, Uminayin, and another thing. How do you know this other thing that a slave that buys a slave could also eat? Oh, same pasuk. The acquired object or thing or person that bought and also acquired something, the acquired also eats. So how do you see from the pasuk? So if you look in the bottom of the chart, you can see how you see in the pasuk. It should say, "V'koyin ki yikne kinyan kaspoy nefesh," and the fact that it says "v'koyin," that's how we read it. There's too many yikna over here. It should say, "V'koyin ki yikna nefesh." Period. Hu yochal boy. What's kinyan kaspoy? So it's as if it says a double lashon of kinyan. Ki yikne kinyan kaspoy. You hear? Again, the pasuk. Let me start from fresh. The pasuk should say, "V'koyin ki yikna nefesh hu yochal boy." What's ki yikna nefesh kinyan kaspoy hu yochal boy? The second red part is extra. So the Gemara darshans it, ki yikna kinyan kaspoy. If there's a double kinyan, the slave, ki yikna, who's doing the purchase? The kinyan kaspoy is doing the purchase. The kinyan kaspoy, the slave, the acquired, did a kinyan, bought another slave. Then he also could eat. Like in the bottom in the green. Ki yikna kinyan kaspoy nefesh. Or, let me do it like this. Ki yikna kinyan kaspoy kama. Who did the nefesh? The kinyan, the double kinyan bought a slave.
You need a special drasha for it.
No. No. He can't. We just say he can't. It's Amanan Shein the Rabbi Rishus boy. Yeah. Kala says, oh, fine. End of story. So the Gemara asks a question. Let these slaves, the woman's slave, Right now they're married. The Kohen Gadol married an almana. It's a lav, but is it a good kiddushin? Yes. So you have here a bad kiddushin, but that worked. Let the slave that's part of this kiddushin eat. It's the slave of the acquired. Let him eat truma. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you Yisayt. If the woman herself could eat truma, then she could give the slave to eat truma. But since she herself can't eat, she can't be the in-between. You have the kohen, then you have a woman, and then you have a slave. If the woman is blank, she can't eat truma, how does the slave eat truma? The slave is only eating truma because of the woman. The woman is not eating. The in-between is no good. I'll give you a couple of examples that the in-between doesn't eat, yet because of that in-between person, somebody else does eat. We're talking about it. Hemophilia. You have a guy who can't have a bris, Nevach. All his relatives die from a bris, he doesn't have a bris, he's a kohen. So he himself is usher to eat truma, but his wife, his slaves, everybody eats truma. V'chol atmeim. What about a kohen that becomes tamei? He cannot eat truma because he's tamei. He has to go to the mikveh, do the whole process, then eat. Imagine if a kohen becomes tamei, his slaves can't eat. It will be a disaster. He becomes tamei, he has to make announcements, find every slave he owns in every corner of the world, in every factory, he has to start, it's meshuggah. It doesn't work like that. A kohen's slave always eats. The master, for a few days, can't eat until he goes to the mikveh, until he takes care of business, he can't eat. But you have a situation where all the slaves are eating because of the master, and the master himself doesn't eat. So you see that your side is a little off. You're telling me that in order for a slave to eat, the master, his balabas, has to be able to eat. It's not true. Says the Gemara, beautiful. Hasam pumayu koevlu. It's not a good zushtel. When the master is tamei, when the master is a arel, so it's a side thing that's preventing him from eating truma. He himself is in the parish of truma. He has a boo-boo on his tongue. Something's wrong with his tongue. He has a toothache. He can't chew. He has to go to the mikveh. But he himself, he's a person that's typically right to go to eat truma. Just today he has tumah. Today he's a arel. If he takes that medicine, I don't know what it's called, Dr. Factor, that they give these the hemophilias, then
Factor 5.
Factor 8. Factor 8. Shkoyach. It's named after the both of us. Dr. Factor and 8 minute daf. 10%. So if he takes his factor 8, he could get a meal right now. Takes a factor 8, boom. So Mela, it's not a good comparison. This woman, she's a halala, she can never ever eat truma in her life. So how in the world is she going to allow her slaves through her to eat truma? If the master, he just has to go to the mikveh. No, he has a toothache. It's a technical problem. Who? Ancillary reason. Leave that out. Next part, I'm sure we'll have to deal with that. Pumayu kavlu. The Chavetz Chaim says, a segulah from the Chavetz Chaim. If somebody has toothaches, which are very painful, you don't talk lashon hara. He says it's a segulah for toothaches. One time, I heard this ma'isa. I don't know how. I guess it's. He told one of his talmidim. He said, "Look in my mouth and count my teeth." He was in his 90s, and the Talmud looked. He was very embarrassed. I said, "No, I can't." But Chavetz Chaim said, "He started counting." He had all his teeth. He said, "When you don't talk lashon hara, even in your, it doesn't pass so much for the Chavetz Chaim in the story, but that's what they say." Okay, pumai kavlu. If you don't talk lashon hara, you don't have pumai kavlu. Vari mamzer. What about a mamzer she'ein oichel umachil? Here's the case, Rabbi Isai. By the way, this is Nichsei Tzayin Barzel. Okay, here's the story. You have a kohen who marries a Bas Yisrael, a Yisraelis, and they have a daughter, whatever you want to call her Dina. Dina is not such a great person. She goes ahead and she marries a mamzer. I guess we don't need this Daniel guy anymore. It was a one-time story, maybe later on, who knows. So, Daniel is a shtik mamzer, and he marries a Bas Kohen. Now, if you look at it right now, Leah, who married a Kohen, she could eat truma, right? A Bas Yisrael who marries a Kohen could eat truma. When the Kohen dies, she could eat truma as long as she has zera. So now, the next case is they have a child. The mamzer has a child. Now, a mamzer has a child. The little guy is a mamzer. So the halacha is that even though the Kohen died and the daughter died, both of them died, and there's a little mamzer running around the world, but he's the zera, the offspring of descendant. Thank you. The descendant of the Kohen, the grandmother, all the way on the top, Miss Leah, she can eat truma. The mamzer himself, the little guy, cannot eat truma. So you see that you don't have to be able to eat truma. You could let other people eat truma because of you, even though you yourself don't eat truma. Mamzer doesn't eat truma. Rashi points out that it was not necessary to say a case of a mamzer. He says even this case, even when a normal Yisrael married the woman and they had a child and the little guy's Yisrael, it's the same point. Even though the Yisrael doesn't eat truma, yet he allows his grandmother to eat truma. So why did the Gemara say such an extreme case of a mamzer? Because that's the case in the Mishnah, says Rashi. It doesn't have to be like that. It could even be this case. Great. Virava Omar. Okay. Omar, sorry. Very mamzer sheneoch Omar Ravina. So the first pshat is Ravina. Kinyan oichel ka'omar. We're not talking about, you asked me a question. I'm telling you that the person himself, the first one in line, Kinyan oichel ka'omar, the first one, Kinyan oichel machel, sheine oichel, einoi machel. You're right, there's a little mamzer 3 generations later that could feed. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the first generation. The woman herself, she herself cannot eat. That's a good reason. I'm asking you a question. Start again. Why is it that almana who marries a kohen gadol, why can't her slaves eat truma? The answer is because she herself doesn't eat truma. And if she herself doesn't eat truma, her slaves don't eat truma. You're asking me she doesn't need to be able to eat truma. You see it from a mamzer? No, she does have to be able to eat truma. The mamzer is a 3rd generation. We're not talking about that. On the 1st generation, in order to be machal your slaves, you must be able to eat truma. That's answer number 1. Rav Omar, he says another pshat. You know what? You're right. Your question is a good question. The woman that comes into marriage with avadim that are nichsim belugder her avadim, they should be able to eat midiraisa on a deraisa level. Rabbanon the Gazi Rabbanon said they shouldn't eat because they should toimar ani eni ocheles. We want to make her feel bad. We want her to realize what's going on. She's sitting at a Shabbos table with her husband. He's eating his chont. She has to eat another chont that the slaves eat. Everything he eats, the grapefruit with the sugar, remember that? He eats one type, she eats the other type. So she's saying to herself, Ani einu ocheles, I don't eat. Avada einu oichlen. Oh, I must be zoyne yetzlei. He must consider me a zoyna. Let's get out of here. I need to get out of this marriage, and it will help the kohen gadol divorce her. Rav Ashi Omar, gzeir shemotachel la'acher misa. If the slaves that are nichsim elug would eat, we don't need this chart anymore. If the slaves will eat while she's alive, then and because of her, then they'll come to eat after the kohen gadol dies. Says the Gemara, Elama'ato bas Yisrael shenisas the kohen. So then you have the same problem any single time a Yisraelis marries a kohen. Like Tachel. She shouldn't be able to feed her slaves. Misa. Taisus has a bomb kasha here. What's the connection? When a Bas Yisrael is married to a kohen, beautiful kasha, Taisus says. I'm just saying it for the beauty of it. When a Bas Yisrael marries a kohen, she eats truma. Then her husband dies. She stops eating truma that minute. At the levaya, she stops eating truma. So she's not going to make the mistake and continue giving her slaves truma. But in our case, she herself never ate truma. She's not allowed to eat truma. She's a chalola. So her slaves were eating truma when her husband was alive. She'll continue giving truma. Fine. Says the Gemara, El Rashi, Ba'almana kohenes. We're talking about that this almana that married a kohen gadol, She was an almana beforehand. She's a widow. She's a kohenes herself. She's almana kohenes. So that's Ruye. She's going to be moira heter. She'll justify her actions. What is she going to say? When my husband died, I ate truma. I was a widow. I ate truma. Why? Because my father's a kohen. I went back to my father's house. I'm allowed to eat truma when my husband dies. I got married to this kohen gadol. I continue eating truma. The gavroi, because of my husband, the kohen gadol. And now nothing changed. I was eating. I kept on eating. I'm going to continue eating. She doesn't realize that she ruined it for herself by becoming a halala. I'm sorry. Before she was loy shavisa, she was not a halala. Now she became a halala. So the Gemara, that's a great teretz. Your teretz only works if she herself was a kohen. What about a regular widow? Says Gemara about once we say that there's a kohenes, almana, who has a problem, she's not going to realize that something changed there and that she became a halala. So we penalized all widows, itmar. Now let's go into what happens with nichse melug, nichse barzel. Who owns what? Hamachnes is shum labayla. Shum means in evaluation, because when you bring in nichse tzoyim barzel, you have to evaluate it. How much is this nursing home worth? How do you know? I said it's worth $10 million. How do you know? You have to bring an appraiser to appraise it. So you have to do an appraisal. You have to do an evaluation. So shum labayla means nichse tzoyim barzel. Here, Meres, Kayla, tell us, so let's say, forget about a nursing home for a second. She comes in with all the furniture. The chandeliers, the furniture, everything. I'm not in the mood of replacing chandeliers now. I have to go to Home Depot and get people to hang it up. Here's $20,000. All the furniture is mine. She says, no. It has a lot of, what's that word? Sentimental value. Thank you. Sentimental value. Who owns what? Because of that shaila that he took such a chrayis. Maybe it says, Rabbi Yehuda Omar Hadini Mo. Rabbi Omar Hadini Moi. Rabbi Yehuda says, and this is how we're going to pass it, the halacha is, she brought it in, she takes it out. Sponsored by Moshe Horn in honor of the Gold Star Multi-Donut. Sponsored anonymously is Zechus from Moshe Yaakov ben Shoshana and both Ruchnis and Gashmis. What's the pshat? What's the svara? Rabbi Yehuda Madini Mo Mishum Shevach Beisavi Odidah Havi. There's a certain covet that comes in, sentimental covet, call it whatever you want. The father said, "Here, take these slaves, take these chandeliers. They're in the family for 400 years. You bring it into your marriage." Didavi, she wants it. She wants to take it back. When she goes back to her father's house, she wants to come back with the stuff. Even though we said in the Mishnah, if they went up in value, went down in value, everything is, it's his problem or his gain. Says Rabami that it goes by achrayas. Achrayas shows ownership. Since going down in value, going up in value, everything has to do with the husband. So they're his. Where in the Mishnah does it say anything about that they're his? All it says, you go to Hertz, rent a car. You rent a car, you sign. I take full responsibility of all damages, all this, all that. Does that mean if you like the car, you can just go to Hertz and give them $20,000? It's the middle of COVID now. You can't get a car anywhere, right? And the value, it's above the suggested. I'm going to go to Hertz. I like this car. I'm giving you blue book value, whatever it's called. Doesn't work like that. You have a achrayas. You bust the tire, you have to pay for it, but it's not yours. Achrayas doesn't translate to ownership. Says the Gemara, okay. But if that's the case, if the husband doesn't really own it, what does he have here? Achrayas, responsibility. Is that enough to enable the slaves to eat truma? Why is that enough? This is gewaldige stuff. Ownership, who owns what, based on what, and how. Woman comes in with stuff. You have to think about these things. Rings, diamonds, jewelry, who owns? He gave it to her. Could he grab it off her? There's a whole need in there. Could he grab it off her finger and sell it because they need money? No. He gave it to her to wear jewelry. It's her. Different things. Oh, I have a great picture for this. I didn't realize. The search. Here. To rent a cow. Socha para. But in this case, not really, they say it's you can rent one of these storage things. Okay, whatever. Rent a cow. Guy rented a cow. Rented a car. It's like renting a car. Same thing as today. How do you fill up fuel? Could you fill the fuel up in the cow with truma? Who owns it? The Yisrael rented it mikhayan. Harezi yachileno karshina truma. Here, karshinim, vetch, type of a bean. Since the actual owner is the kohen, so you can feed the kohen's animal with truma. Today it's in my possession. I can do whatever I want. I can drive 100 miles an hour, go on sidewalks, spin the car. But the fuel could be the kohen's. Says Gemara, however, the reverse, same halacha. But if the kohen rented it from Yisrael, even though he's chayiv to fill it up with fuel and feed it. In other words, what does that mean? How does that translate to us? Chayiv and achrayos lo yachilenu karshina truma. So what do you see over here? You chayiv achrayos. You can't feed a truma. So how come in our Mishnah chayiv achrayos? He's chayiv and responsible on the slaves. They died. They this, that. He has to pay. And he could feed truma. So you see chayiv. So what is it? Which one is it? Says the Gemara. Wait a minute. A guy that rents a car or a cow, what is he chayiv? He's chayiv in some achrayos, correct. But how much? Begneva and aveda, which is the lowest level. You have to make sure nobody steals it. You have to make sure it doesn't get lost. You can't come to the rental company, I forgot where I parked it. It doesn't work like that. But on sale, if the engine goes out, it went down in value. If things in the actual cow, it got weak and old, that you don't have to pay the difference when you rent a cow. You're out of there. So Memela, Holidamia Lilseifa. Well, that's similar to something else. Yisrael Shisham, Para, Mikayan, a guy. Again, he went to rent a cow and he did an evaluation. So the Yisrael who rented it from a kohen, now the halacha is reversed. Because now he took full responsibility. He evaluated it. In other words, when he returns it, he has to return it exactly like he got it. And if it goes down in value, the cow, he has to pay that difference. It's not like renting a car. Now he took serious achrayos. That's similar to what? To our Mishnah. That's an achrayos on a whole different level. That's not achrayos gnei aveda. That's achrayos on kichosh and everything. Mimela, even though the real owner is a kohen, he cannot feed it truma. And the opposite, this is the chiddush, or this will understand even better. What if the reverse? Hertz is owned by Yisrael. And he goes into the kohen and he does an evaluation. Then it's like mamish the kohen's, and then he could feed it. And in our Mishnah. So, what do you see? In our Mishnah, the kohen took full responsibility and he could feed the slaves, whatever. But who owns it? Who owns the slave? The woman still owns the slave. Has nothing to do with the achrayos. So in Mela, the husband is going to have to give back the chandeliers and give back everything. He can't just pay for it. Yosef, Rabbi, Rav Yosef, B'shili Pirkei de Rav Nachman. Rabbi and Rav Yosef were there after the shiur of Rav Nachman. The Yasvik Kamri. They were sitting and saying, the Yavit says, very interesting, that during the shiur they weren't allowed to ask questions. You hear this, Dr. Factor? Couldn't open your mouth during shiur. After shiur, then all of a sudden, Yosef Kamri. And he also says that they used to stand during shiur. We learned that they were in circles, maybe it means more chashuv. Fine, stand up, Dr. Factor. Yosef Kamri. I have a raya in both directions that the nichsei tzoyim barzel, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the wives, according to Rabbi Ami, it's the husbands. I have a raya to both directions. I have a slave. The halacha is a slave that you by mistake poke out his eye or a tooth, or let's say cut off his ear, something that's visible, the slave goes out right away. The husband who didn't purchase the slaves, it came in the marriage, he pokes out the slave's eye, boom, goes out. The woman who brings these slaves in, she comes in like a big hacker. Oh, look at my father's slaves. I'm going, She pokes out the tooth, breaks the tooth, nothing happens. Why? You see from here, who's the owner? Who's the real owner? The person that takes Zechrayas. Okay, great raya that it goes, like Rabami, that it goes to the husband. Tanya Gava said to Rav Yehuda, what is shum? Again, Rabbi said, what does shum mean? Not garlic. Evaluation, but what kind? Tzim barzel, because you have to evaluate it. He doesn't have the right to sell like Rav Yehuda that it's owned by the woman. What if it's the reverse? He brings in like a gift or something. He says, here, this is yours. You take a chrayis on it. You get to benefit from it. If one or the other, machushneim over here, put it right in your Gemara, it doesn't mean both, it means one or the other. Parnasah. That's just the way it is. Usually you sell your diamond ring when you need it, just to have food on the table. Yeah. This is a crazy story. This is mamish chutzpah. Listen to this. The husband takes the wife's slaves, goes to the marketplace, sells off the slaves for $50,000. 2 weeks later, he comes back to the guy and says, listen, I wasn't allowed to sell it to you. You know, they're really my wife's. I didn't tell you. Give me back the slaves. He takes back the slaves. I think it's a tremendous chutzpah. But that's the halacha, because he sold it without permission. He has the right to go back and take it from him. Huh? Yeah, of course he has to pay him back. Chutzpah got attached to the slave. He finally found a good help. Garnished. Fine. So what's going on here? The name of Nachman halacha Yehuda that what? It's the woman's. Tzoim barzel, the woman's. But what about this bride that we just mentioned? Great riot to Rabami. I've got this sign of Rabami, Mr. B'time the Rav Yehuda. I like Rav Yehuda, Mishum Shevach Beisavia, because of the honor of the father. That's how he brought it in. Let's just do the story real quickly. It's the same thing. It's very easy. A woman comes into the marriage with a beautiful silk thing. In those days, imagine what it cost to make a garment out of silk handmade, thousands. And she put in the ksuva that it's hers. It's tzoim barzel, shachiv. The guy dies, the husband dies. Shaklu yasme. So they said, you know what? She's going to take it. We're not going to let that happen. They took it, uparsua misna. They took it and they put it on top of the dead person. Omerava kanya misna. The tachrichim are asur bahana, just like hegdish. We learned that out from the egla arufa. Just like egla arufa is asur bahana, so too anything that goes on a dead person. And that's it. The halacha is, here in this saying, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, it's the wife's. How did the Yisayimim have the right to take something that doesn't belong to them and put it on a dead person? Even if they did so, you could take it off the dead person. It doesn't become asur ba'ana unless you own it. The wife never collected it. She's missing the collection. Yes, you're right, it's hers. You're right, they have to pay for it, but she never collected it, and therefore it's as if it's in their possession and they have the right to asur ba'ana. Have a wonderful day. Yishkoyach for coming.